Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. I am your host, Wendy Nystrom. And today's special guest is NiK Kacy. As I've spoken in the past, the LGBTQ community has been on attack lately, and I am here to share people's story that everybody is the same, everyone is equal. So NiK is a transmasc, non-binary, genderqueer designer, advocate, and activist based in Los Angeles. NiK is also the creator and executive producer of Equality Fashion Week, the first LGBTQ plus focused fashion week in Los Angeles, as well as the founder and president of NiK Kacy's Footwear, an LGBT certified business and the first gender equal footwear and accessories brand for genders and identities of all spectrums. NiK, you do a lot of work.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. I just to get through that whole dialogue of everything you work on is pretty magnificent. And just so people know, I'm sorry?
It's a tongue twister.
It is. There's a lot. But just so people know, NiK and I are doing a part 2 to this interview, focusing purely on the brand and the footwear that NiK designs. But today we're going to talk about NiK's story, NiK's background, NiK's life. So NiK, where were you born and how did you grow up?
So I was born in Hong Kong, actually, and I moved to New York when I think I was around 7. And, my parents actually separated and divorced somewhere in that time period, but I'm not sure when because nobody ever told me.
Oh, okay.
I was just kind of like plucked from one country to the other. And when I moved to New York, my mom's side of the family spoke Mandarin and my native tongue was Cantonese. And I didn't speak English, so it was very challenging, to say the least, when I moved here. But as I think any immigrant experiences, you have to acclimate, and you have to learn the language. And I experienced, I think, a lot of bullying, to the point where at some point in my life, I actually turned into the bully in order to just survive.
Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah, and I think that just had so many layers and intersectionalities of struggles that I experienced, not to mention knowing from a young age I was born in the wrong body. I just never really got to address it or cope with it because I was too busy trying to be an immigrant and acclimating, and getting grades, and learning the language, and not just one, but 2 languages at the same time. So it was very interesting. And then I moved to LA when I went to college. And then during college, I lived in Japan, Singapore, and for a while, until I realized that home is where the heart is, and my heart was in LA.
Just from your story, the brief bit you just gave, you sound like someone who has absolutely no fear. Yeah. And, you said you became the bully, and usually bullies become bullies because of fear, but you've learned languages, you dealt with bullies, you dealt with growing up in a country that wasn't normal to you. You then moved to Japan and Singapore. Most people wouldn't have been able to do that.
I think I'm always craving for the experience of finding myself, I think, and I think that because I was kind of, when you're born and your family moves you somewhere to a different country and your family breaks up or whatnot, those are all things beyond your control, and you have no choice in, right? No say in. And I think that it's kind of taught me that I'm always craving to create things that I have control over. So I feel like I have purpose, because for so much of my life, I didn't feel like I had purpose because I didn't know if I was wanted. I didn't feel like I was wanted. I was born in the wrong body, so I felt like the world didn't even want me. I felt like my family didn't want me. At one point I was living at the neighbor's house, but as a kid, I was like, my family doesn't want me, but and now as an adult, I understood that they wanted me to learn the language faster. So they put me with the neighbors that was this American, Italian, German family. But as a child, I was kind of like, what just happened?
Yeah. Why'd you move into the neighbors? What's happening here?
So I think I just always felt like I didn't belong, and that I didn't fit in the world, and I didn't understand what my place was, because I didn't understand why I was born this way, and why I was kind of brought into a world that I didn't feel welcomed, in so many ways. So as an adult, I think that I just constantly crave being of service, and like creating things for people to, problem solve, to come up with solutions,
You're
like
the best kind of
all
person, actually.
yeah. So that's why, my mom even tells me that I'm kind of fearless that way, from like the tattoos I get, to the traveling to different countries, to starting a shoe business that I had no business starting because I knew nothing about shoemaking. Uh, but I'm just kind of like, you figure it out, and everything
Yeah.
in life is, you just figure it out.
And that is also very brave. I mean, I myself am guilty of not following through on things that I say, well, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. Okay. Full disclosure. I've always wanted to learn how to sew. I suck at it. Therefore, I'm not doing it. And I've had friends try to encourage me. And I'm like, it's that fear. It's that mental block wall that I put up. And it's my own damn fault. And your fearlessness is actually quite inspiring, that you're just like, you figure it out. Yeah, you're going to screw it up, but you figure it out.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I never imagined that like any choices that I make, or any steps that I take, are meant to be inspiring, because for me, so much of it has been a survival mechanism, right? And
Okay.
so in that longing to survive and eventually learn to thrive, you kind of just keep trying, you keep, I think that's one thing that I remember when I was in college. I got a job at the communication center, working in, the telecommunications, room with all the tapes and everything for their newsroom. And I literally walked up the steps of Pepperdine, um, up this hill every day, just to ask him if I can get this job here. And finally, after like 2 weeks, he finally gave me the job, because he was just like, "You're very persistent, and you don't give up." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, what's the point if
Yeah,
you do give up, right? If you want something." I'm so
that's
sorry.
very true.
Did you hear that?
That's
Beep?
okay.
Okay.
It
I
was it was like an enlightenment ding.
yeah. I need to tell this person to stop. It's my partner, so I
No
need.
worries. No worries. While you're typing, I mean, that just brings me back to growing up, being fearless. Not everyone understands the LGBTQ community. So if you're going to explain, what that means to someone who may not understand, who may have lived a sheltered life, who may have, never ventured out and gone to the gay clubs, how would you explain what the importance of being your authentic self, being your true self to that person?
It's hard to ever. I feel like it's never my place to try to tell people how to exist, because
Yeah.
I, for one, can say that no one else will ever understand my experience exactly the way I experience it, right?
Absolutely.
But I can say that one of the things I've learned in life, and if I ever had to go back, and if I was able to tell my younger self something, it would be that, to just never let anyone else darken your light.
Oh, I love that.
I always believed in myself, even when there was nobody who believed in me, or that I didn't feel like the world wanted me. I just believe that there must be a reason that I'm here, right? And trust me, I struggled with suicide. I struggled with wanting to exist in this world, because I felt so unwanted, and like the sense of the lack of belonging
Yeah.
is so harmful for young people and adults, for everyone really. It is, that's why I think mental health issues exist, and there's depression, and there's all of these things that LGBT folks struggle with,
Yes.
because we live in a world that doesn't accept us just as humans.
Yeah.
Um, so really it's about my own self-determination of, well, if I'm not accepted because of my gender identity or because of who I love, maybe the world will love me because I'm really great at art or I'm really great at all these other things, you know? And I just felt like I have so much to offer the world, and it goes beyond what I look like and who I love and what's between my legs, you know what I mean? And I think that that's what I started to focus on more in my from my childhood, like high school. I was just always very not only academic but like extracurricular activities. I just really believed in like being of service and like doing as much as I can and exploring as much as I can of myself, of my own talents, so that I can share that with the world, you know.
Beautifully said. And, you know, when you and I first started talking, you did mention that the struggle with being marginalized in society.
Yeah.
And that love is love, and that there shouldn't be, you know, this discrimination. Everyone's equal. Everyone should be treated the same.
Yeah.
And it should be based on, you know, the person. Just who are you? If you're a jerk, fine, you're a jerk.
Right.
If you're a good person, you're a good person.
Right.
And we shouldn't be doing labels. I'm personally quite tired of labels myself. But, you know, it just should be accepting the person. Do you like them? Are they a good person? Are they nice to you? That's all that matters.
That really is. And that's the thing is, I think when I was younger, before I got really involved with the activism part of my life, I always just thought like the fact that I'm queer and the fact that I'm trans and non-binary is like only a small piece of who I am. You know, I didn't actually expect to end up on a journey where I became such an outspoken person about, you know, gender identity and, you know, being an activist, using fashion, all of these things. I never actually thought that that was the trajectory of my life, because I had actually just wanted to be a painter and sculptor, you know? And I think that just being so, I don't like to use the word marginalized. You know, I think it's like there's a lack of visibility. There's a lack of representation. I grew up not seeing anyone that was like me, you know, on the inside or the outside. And I think being assigned female at birth, especially in Asian culture, in a predominantly white cis world that I grew up in, you know, we are exoticized. You know, we are raised to not speak, only serve, you know, to be quiet, to serve everybody else. And then when we're on the streets, we're exoticized by men constantly. You know, the way I look at my life when I was like female presenting to what I experience now, it's like so day and night, you know what I mean? And it's very interesting how, you know, not to segue into this, but like it's very interesting to me how from one day to the next, when I like am presenting to the world, to me the same as always, but how depending on perception of the other person, how differently I'm treated.
Yeah.
You know, the passing privileges that I get if someone thinks I'm a man versus when they think I'm, you know, just a really butch dykey lesbian, you know, it is night and day. You know, I have
can imagine.
called like a don't be a backseat driver to an Uber driver to being like, yes, boss, whatever you say.
Wow.
I did nothing differently. I just said, you know, I lived in this area and I said, make it right here. You'll probably have less traffic. But just day and night difference in responses because of how they perceived me just by the exterior.
Yeah. I mean, I was a female in insurance, corporate insurance. And let me tell you, I saw very, very dumb men get treated very well, and very smart women get dismissed. Go sew something. So I'm glad you brought that up. And you know what? I know you didn't plan on being an advocate and helping people, but that is probably not the most important thing, but extremely important to help everyone else and say, I'm not alone in this journey. I'm not weird. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just different.
Yeah.
And we need to, well, first of all, everyone being the same would be freaking boring. I mean, good Lord, I don't want that myself. And if we all have something different and unique, I think that just makes everyone and the whole world more interesting for everybody to enjoy.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. I mean, I grew up around a lot of very interesting people. When I went to college, I only went to the gay clubs because when it was safe, I didn't have to worry about being grabbed. And this was Boston. Boys are grabby. So I kind of grew up in those clubs. And, you know, I was really good friends with the drag queens and I loved those ladies. They also took care of me and they looked out for me. So, you know, it's a very important industry. But, you know, getting back to taking pride in what you do, and we are going to have a whole section on the clothing because the shoes are fabulous. And
thank you.
I'm very excited about the shoes. But taking pride in and, you know, talking about your brand and everything. But what makes you stand apart from everybody else?
As a human?
Both the human and your brand.
Okay. Well, the brand is unique because when I set on this journey, it really started as like, you know, if nothing else, I have a new shoe wardrobe, you know, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't a hypocrite. You know, I didn't want to just make shoes for myself or people like me, which is masculine identifying or masculine of center identifying. I wanted to make shoes for all people, no matter what their gender identity or expression or whatever, you know. People should be able to just wear what they want because it makes them feel good. That's it. And, you know, clothing, shoes, objects, they're all just products. They don't have genders. So I don't know why we keep assigning genders to them. You know, like what's up with Bic making, you know, pens for women?
Oh, yeah. And they were more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I don't understand. And I don't know, you know, that's a world that exists that I don't understand. So I thought, well, just like as always, you know, most queer people, that's how we do is when we're underrepresented and there's a problem for a lack of representation, we solve it by creating things ourselves. And we are incredibly talented in that area because we know the problem because we have experienced it our whole lives. So we know how to solve it. And so when I created the shoe brand, I wanted to create a new sizing system, which honestly, like the European sizes is pretty close to being gender neutral or gender free.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But they still, you know, base it off of like a masculine and a feminine proportion.
Okay.
So for me, I kind of broke that down even further. And I'm using their sizes because it's something that the world already understands. But I changed the last, which is the mold of the shoe.
Okay.
The mold of the shoe is what breaks it down from the, you know, men or women's shoe. So when I created this new mold, I kind of just averaged out what most people consider, you know, what factories, like when factories work with shoes, they work with either men or women's last, the molds.
Okay.
Right? So I kind of broke that down and just created a new version that is completely gender free and gender equal so that it fits. That's it, you know, like
such a simple concept.
Yeah. You know, and the truth is that with the way that like technology has advanced, with the way that nutrition has advanced, you know, humanity, like sizing is so different now than it used to be, you know.
Oh yeah.
We have a range of sizes of all different types of people and all different types of identities. So we really should not be categorizing in this binary because we are so much more than that.
Very true. You know, when you were talking about what's called the pink tax, women pay more.
Yeah.
When I would when I first moved to New York and I was, you know, a young professional and I was going to get my shirts pressed because I was a grown up now. And I went to the dry cleaner and I said, you know, I have some shirts to get pressed. And they said, oh, it's a woman's shirt. So you can't do the men's pressing, which was like $1 a shirt. You have to do hand pressing for $4 a shirt. Now, for people who don't know me, I'm about 5'10". I'm not small.
Right.
And I looked at the lady, I said, look at me. I'm bigger than most men.
Right.
And she said, no, it won't fit the machine. I'm like, again, look at me. My shirt will fit the men's shirts, whatever thing you use. And I ended up just having to take my shirts back and iron them myself because they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And trust me, folks, the shirt would have fit. It was,
of course it would have fit. Like,
yeah.
it doesn't make sense. And I remember when I was in college, like trying to get a haircut, and you know, I'm like a poor student, and I would be like, I have short hair. Why do you want to charge me the women's hair, which was like $20 more, when you can just charge me the men's hair? Because that's basically what I have, you know. But it was crazy, and that continues to exist, and I don't understand.
But you want it styled? No.
Right.
Just gonna,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
No, I had a girlfriend who would go to the barber, and she's like, just cut the bottom, straight line.
Right.
That's all I want. And that's what he did. He was, 107, and he just snipped right across, and she was happy with it. She's like, that's all I wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Just keeping it simple. But going back to, your successes that you've had, from starting off being an immigrant, learning 3 languages, basically, having your, trying to figure out where you fit in the world. What kind of messaging could you give someone who's just starting out in their journey, who's maybe 12, 13 years old and saying, I don't feel right? Something, what would be your best advice?
Well, I would say first, is there's no right or wrong in feeling, because it's the world that's got the issue, it's not us, and so that's the first thing I would say. And then second, I would just say, I mean, it does get better, right? Like it gets better, because I think for all kids, even for those who don't have gender dysphoria, it's hard. It's hard to be a kid.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, it's so hard because you're young, you don't know anything, and you think you know, but you don't, and the world thinks that, they are right about everything. And it's hard because we're constantly learning, and language keeps evolving, identities and expressions evolve, everything keeps evolving, but the patriarchy doesn't.
Oh, I know that one. Trust me on that.
Yeah. So, but I digress. But yeah, I would tell anyone who's just trying to figure themselves out, and I have lots of parents that come to me all the time, with either gender non-binary kids or trans kids, that they're just struggling. And it honestly is, in my mind, no different than any other struggle that kids have, whether it's eating disorder, depression, mental illness. All of us struggle with so many things. It's society that is always trying to ingrain in us that, like, this particularly is wrong. But it's not really much different than any other thing that we struggle with. And I think that if kids find a way to find their, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say peace, but like find their joy. They find a way to find their joy, whether it's through finding community.
Yeah.
If their family is unable to be the community that they need, there are others who can be.
Absolutely.
And that's, go ahead.
I was just going to say it. And I mean, my background, my uncle was gay back in the 60s, 70s, and he had to hide it. He really had to live a very secretive life. And that was primarily because my parents were totally cool with it. But it is better now. People are getting better. Yes, there is backlash from a certain group of people that I personally don't understand. This is why we're doing this right now. But there are organizations, there are people that you can talk to. There are huge communities out there that you can find shelter with. There's always somewhere to go, so people don't have to be afraid anymore. It just takes that courage to say, I'm not with the right people. I'm not with the right group. I need to venture out and find my people.
Right.
And once you do, your entire world will change for the better.
Absolutely. And that definitely is what happened for me. It's like during the AIDS crisis, they said, silence equals death.
Yeah.
It is absolutely true in every way, and And when I found my tribe, that is really when my life started to take off, you know, and helped me really discover like who I am and who I wanted to be. And like you said earlier, you know, full circle is, even though this was never the trajectory for me, because as a kid, I actually hated public speaking. I would get anxious and nauseous and like I get diarrhea. I mean, it was awful. It was just the most awful experience for me to just publicly speak to anybody. Well, I don't care if it was a room of one person or 10, you know?
Yeah.
And now I can talk to a room of hundreds of people, you know, and feel like, well, all that matters to me is that I get to share my journey, because hopefully, even if it made a difference to one person, that makes it all worth it, you know? And it's so powerful, because just because I did not grow up with the kind of support and visibility that would have helped me thrive earlier, doesn't mean that I can't take that struggle and that experience to pay it forward to help prevent someone else from having to experience the struggles that I struggled with.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you're taking a positive on that, because, you know, I know people that have had horrible childhoods, and some have used it for the good. It's like, I'm going to have the best kids ever. I'm going to give them all the love I never got. But then I also know people that are like, you know, my childhood was horrible. Everything's horrible. I'm just going to be I'm just going to be mean to everybody because people were mean to me. And it's such an unhealthy way to do it. So I love your positive outlook of help everyone, give somebody, just lend an ear. You can talk to them, you can help them out, you can give them advice. And with that comes the courage that's so desperately needed. A lot of us get beaten up, you know, mentally, not physically, well, physically too, but we get beaten up constantly. Of you're doing this wrong. You have to do it this way. You know, this is what's normal. I don't really think there is a normal that makes sense. Right. Everyone's got their own path in life, and Lord knows I became a scientist. I studied rocks and dirt in college. Okay. So I don't really think there is a normal that makes sense.
Yeah. Who's to say what's normal?
Yeah.
You know, like, who's normal enough to actually declare this is normal?
Yeah. Not anyone I know. And quite honestly, the most interesting people I've ever met in my life are the ones that are way out there. They're more fun, and quite honestly, they have their act together more often than not.
Yeah.
They just have it figured out, and they kind of slough off all that stress, and they live their most authentic life.
Yeah.
And I pray to be that one day.
Right.
No, and I'll stop there. But on that, so any final words, closing words about your life, your upbringing, your journey?
Gosh, I mean, there's so much more. I would say, just to wrap this up, you know, it's a constant learning experience, you know, and that I used to grow up being told, especially in the Asian culture, the Chinese culture is very much about like not failing. Like I would come home with a 99 and my mom would ask me like, where did that 1 point go? But one of the things that I think I finally learned in life now is that there's no such thing as failure, because every time I have learned something out of it, I've gotten something out of it. So how could it possibly be failure? You know, it's all a success. It's just about perspective of what your success is.
I love that statement, because you do learn from your mistakes. And when you do get something wrong, you focus on it and say, I'm not going to do that again. Exactly. And and you do learn more from your errors than you do from what you got. When you got it right, you're like, okay, done, gone, back of the head, not paying attention. So that's brilliant advice. Always learn from that. So on that, and guys, expect part 2 with Nick. We're going to talk shoes. Very excited about this one.
Can't wait.
So that one's coming up next week as well. We will talk to you guys later. I'm Wendy Nystrom, your host with Environmental Social Justice, with my guest, NiK Kacy. And thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.